Yes, fancy meeting you here. Count Basie, the orchestra, Birdland, right here in New York City. Well, that spotlight falls on three other members of the Count Basie aggregation. Paul Quintachet, Jimmy Wilkins, Marshall Royal, Count in the orchestra, and a little Basie kick.
And we are back. If yesterday was second Monday, can we call today like third Monday? That's where my week's at. It's like third Monday. I sat in front of the computer yesterday, and if you're going to do those little reels and shorts and things like that, you got to, I'm learning the whole podcast thing. I'm a content guy in terms of, I know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about unity. I want to talk about how we can follow Jesus together. And so then I'm kind of cobbling together all those things and the technology, and I'm searching the interwebs for all the how to do the stuff. And so, yesterday I worked on reels all day because you got to do those little shorts or whatever they are. Apparently that's the thing. So, if a bunch of shorts start popping up in your feed and you're like, dude, get this guy off, and, give me some feedback. Love hearing your feedback. And I share a lot of your guys' stories. Some of you guys text me and ping me, and it's like I don't want to write a novel back. But man, I'm a work in progress too, and it's awesome to hear stories that I never took the time to listen to, years ago. And we all do better over time. The Christian life's all about change and leaning into being more like Jesus. That's really what we're all about here. So. Also, that's it. A strong wind blew. The AC kicked on, and now I'm lost. No, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take another step together towards following after Jesus, and we're going to do that without being dismissive and without being divisive with people who are honestly pursuing Jesus with us. Instead, we're going to humble ourselves, and we're going to figure out how to increase the places where we agree about Jesus, and how to not stand over each other and, let our pride and our fear get in the way. We're going to take another step together towards following Jesus. It's what we do every day. Take it away, Chuck.
And being willing to be less than the least became the greatest of all. Let us imitate him who was King of Kings and yet a servant of servants.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Would you turn on my microphone, please?
It's right here in the hall closet.
It's right here in the hall closet. I don't know. That's. I'm sorry. I can't talk about it again today. I already talked about it yesterday. The early 1900s talkie voice. It's great. So, what are we going to talk about today? When we understand each other, we win. That's really what it is. What we talked about yesterday, we're just trying to do three things. We have three basic problems in Christianity that keep us dividing. And the Catholics look over and they go, ha, 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 look at you guys. You're supposed to be Protestant and sola scriptura, but like every day there's a new denomination. Every day there's a new faith group that pops up, Any knucklehead can just, grab their NIV and pop open a church in a strip mall. And, I generally have a positive view to people trying to do those kind of things. I think they have good intentions, and I would look at that and say, where we disagree about Jesus, maybe let's lean in instead of lean away. But at some point, the criticism from 1,000 feet out is to just look at Protestantism as this continuing dividing thing. And so at some point, all of the divisions, if we keep widening the circle, it just deludes who we're saying we follow. The Jesus that we worship, or at least the part of Jesus that we agree about, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And to work against this, we have to not start from the top down, but we have to start with the people we know right around us and develop a different culture. And when we develop that different culture, that's something that can be, and you may have heard this phrase, everyone says it, well, we want it to be caught, not taught, right? Because, and I catch myself here on this podcast, talking a lot of theory. And the theory is probably not practically helpful for a lot of people. And so I try and find videos and places where I can demonstrate how we can do this, where you can see it in action, where you can see the little bits of it at work, because we want this to be a cultural shift. And when it's a life-to-life cultural shift, then it's going to work out into the highest levels of how we follow as Protestants. And so the issues that are dividing us and the culture we need to shift is the culture of dismissiveness, that where we disagree about Jesus, let's not worry about that. And it's kind of a half-truth, because we should start where we agree. We should all start where we agree. We should be nodding our head yes to the places where we agree about Jesus. But we add to that an assumption that starting and spending most of our time where we agree about Jesus means we don't have to talk about where we disagree. Well, the problem is the more people you add to the room, the more disagreement you have, the less you can talk about. The more people you add to the room, the more disagreement there is, the less there is to talk about and agree about. So we need a mechanism to work out our differences and to come to greater unity where we disagree. And that really is about how we treat each other where we disagree. It's about how we can answer the question of Jesus and have some kind of a sane chance at coming to the same answer. If we all use the Bible differently and read it differently, we're all going to have different answers for Jesus. And then what are we going to do? So is there a way to read the Bible? Is there a way that we can read it? And is there a way that we can work on the question, who is Jesus, and have some kind of a sane chance at coming to the same answer? And the last thing is, we'll never do anything about our disunity if none of us are willing to change, or if only some of us are willing to change. Or if some of us sit over here and go, you all need to change. That I have to come to the table as an equal disciple to my brother or my sister and sit at the foot of the cross with them together and contemplate the great wonder of Jesus, of God incarnate, of a God who would walk among us, die on a cross, rise from death, and show us the way to eternal life in him. So today we're going to talk about why when we listen, we win. When we fully listen, when we fully understand someone else, we win. And oftentimes we think, well, I really understand them. I totally understand them. But we kind of understand them on a surface level. We hear their words, and then we've put them in a box. We hear their words, and we've said, well, I know who you are because I heard you talk about this one theological thing one time. You're a dispensationalist, therefore your faith is like this. And we've got a little box for them. You're a charismatic, therefore your faith is like this. You're Arminian, whatever the point is. The thing that we're missing when we try and listen and understand each other is their why. We have to understand someone's why behind what they're saying. Why does this matter to them? Someone comes up to us and they want to talk about, end times and Calvin are my go-to examples, just because, free will. Someone wants to talk about free will and they want to talk about end times. And those seem to be some of the most commonly dismissed topics. And they want to talk about it, and we never take the time to understand the why behind it. Maybe they're wrestling with God's sovereignty because they spent some time overseas and they saw some really terrible things. If you've had any friends from overseas who've gone to, who were in the Afghanistan debacle for like 20 years, Iraq, in any engagement, no matter how just or unjust it was, it's all the same thing. It's fighting and killing and death, and it's horrible. And people don't come back from that the same. And then they have questions. And oftentimes, they don't want to lead with their pain, especially if they're a dude, right? So they want to lead with the theology. They want to talk about, well, here's my problem with Christianity. You say God's sovereign, but look at what I saw. Understanding someone's why and why they're talking helps us understand why the issue matters. But we can't turn the why up over the what. We have to understand what they're saying and engage in it with honesty, but we also have to ask them what their why is. But here's the thing, we can't assume why someone's talking. I find this I don't want to pick on people, but I find this in certain temperaments, in sometimes in certain political leanings. The idea of those poor people puts upon someone something that maybe they wouldn't put upon themselves. We'll come back to that a little bit. But we have to let someone else tell us their why. And then we are bound to their words for their why, not our assumption behind their words. We're not the Holy Spirit, okay? We can't see into someone's heart. God gave us 2 ears and eyes, and we can look on someone's countenance, and we can hear their words, and then they tell us the what. And then if they trust us, if we've developed trust with them because we're trying to empathize, then maybe they'll tell us the why. And they'll be transparent about that. And that takes time. But when we fully understand someone else, that's when we win. Because when we get over that obstacle, we're getting around our pride, we're getting around our fear, we're getting around our judgment of others. We're humbling ourselves. We're standing next to someone with our arm around them, seeing the problem they see from their perspective. I think it's Brene Brown who talks about getting in the ring with someone. If you're in the gladiators ring and you're fighting the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and all of the Romans and all of the other gladiators or whatever, and you're fighting for your life. You don't really care about what someone in the stands is saying. Give them the old 1-2. Yeah, I'm not even listening to you. But if someone climbs into the ring with you and stands next to you and faces what you face and sees what you see, that's someone you can trust, and that's who we want to be. So we want to fully understand people. That's when we win, and when we understand someone's why. And we don't get to disagree with someone's profession of why without serious proof that they're lying. We don't get to assume someone starts talking and say, well, yeah, they say it's this, but really it's that, I know. Because I've been around the block, because I'm a pastor, because I'm a small group leader, because I've got these gifts of the Spirit, because I've got discernment, because I talked to these other people who they talked to, and I'm talking to all the sources and putting the picture together. And in ministry, in times when I have found myself engaging in that type of discourse, it's never really worked out for the best for the people I'm trying to love and care for. What's always worked out for the best for them is when I humble myself and I just stand next to them and I hear what they say and I believe them. When we listen, we win. So how do we do this? Well, there's all this division in Christian culture, right? And there's division on all of the things. And when you bring something up, we're seeing symptoms of the problem, right? And oftentimes people will talk about this idea of deconstruction. And I don't want to harp on anyone. I know people, no one likes to be called a deconstructionist anymore. It's become a negative word, so don't label people that. But there has been a movement where people are trying to deconstruct their faith. And there is some kind of wisdom in something like that, in that if I'm experiencing a surface level problem, I need to dig down underneath and know what the underlying issue is so that I'm not just trying to put my finger in holes in the dam. A new one pops up every time because the pressure is still there. I need to know the underlying issue. I use this analogy of, if someone says, hey, I'm walking and my leg hurts, what kind of advice do we give them? Do we say, well, stop walking? Well, that might be great advice if they had like a broken leg or, a torn ACL or something, right? But if they're walking on hot coals and that's why their leg hurts, well then stop walking is terrible advice. Run, go. If the pain's not going to stop until you get to the other side. So we have to understand the underlying issues. So when we look at these issues, like how does the Holy Spirit work? What's the deal with miracles? What's the deal with end times? What's the deal with all of this other stuff? We often find ourselves staying in these surface level conversations. And here's the point. Our conclusions about Jesus and about our faith cloud our ability to hear someone's why. I can't hear their why because my theology is in the way. I can't hear their why because I got the big banana in my ear, right? I got the things I think about Jesus, and I'm filtering what someone says through that instead of trying to understand the meaning of their words that they're trying to hand me. It's like a gift they're giving me, and I keep kind of slapping it away. Yeah, I don't need that. I'm not trying to hear that, you know? And part of that is the idea that we each get our own view about Jesus and about politics and about all the things. For the Jesus follower, for the Jesus, bleh. All right, rubber baby buggy bumper. All right, I'm going to get this right. For the Jesus follower, we don't get our own opinion. We give up our right to be right and take on Jesus' righteousness. Everything that Jesus is. And if we don't like it, or it makes us uncomfortable to proclaim the truth of Jesus in culture because it disagrees with what culture values, that's part of the challenge of following Jesus. But as a follower of Jesus, I don't get to have my view. I get to have Jesus' view. But especially here in America, we're so arrogant that we think that we get our own version of Jesus. And I thought that for a long time. Well, this is what I think, and I'm entitled to it. This is what I think on politics, and I'm entitled to it. That's not the heart of Jesus. Jesus isn't the one telling us, yeah, go your own way. Jesus is the one saying, you are a body, and people will know you by the way you love each other, by the way you treat each other, by how you lower yourself and wash each other's feet. So, look, we can't stop having our individual opinions, but we can definitely adopt the mindset that maybe the stink in the room is me. Maybe I'm the smelly one. Maybe I'm the one that needs to reconsider my position. That's humility. It doesn't mean that we will reconsider our position. You know, I hold very strongly to the things that I believe, but I try and remind myself that just because it makes sense to me in my imperfection doesn't mean that it's right or that it's the heart of Jesus. So I have to lean in with humility. And so there's a difference between checking what we think we know because we're insecure and checking what we think we know to see if we missed a step. And I always want to try, and I aspire to be, and again, I'm just climbing the mountain with everyone else here. I'm not, I'm a fellow journeyman. All right. So this is all stuff that's at work in my life, and I have not mastered just like anyone else. But I check my opinion to see if I missed a step. I try and avoid checking my opinion for insecurity. That if I know my math is right, then I get the confidence I'm looking for anyway. But if I check my opinion for validation, then I don't really care if I'm right. I care if I feel good. I would rather derive my sense of confidence from other believers agreeing with my math than derive my confidence because people are patting me on the back saying, go, go, go. You know, it's that confidence of knowing the truth that allows us to step out in the darkest times. All right, so look, what we're going to do, we're going to watch a couple of short videos here. And listen, if we don't let go of our right to be right, we end up filtering others through our beliefs. If we don't let go of our right to be right, we end up filtering others through our beliefs. So whatever I believe about something, that's the box I've created for them. And I get to be the judge of them. And that's the wrong tree in the garden. That's the wrong fruit. That's not the fruit that brings life. That's the fruit that says I can sit in God's throne. The fruit that brings life is to remain in Jesus and to humble ourselves and to do as he did. And remember, there's never a moment where Jesus said, hey, you Pharisees, and the Pharisees go, that's not what we believe. All right? So that's kind of our main point for today, and I want to show a couple examples here. Now, this first one is not that. I always do that. I always start with the wrong clip up. This first one here is it's from Turning Point USA. That was Charlie Kirk's organization, and it's from a Brexit. You know, they had the Brexit, and so now they're talking about the DEI stuff, and it's on race, but I'm not trying to engage in the subject of race. What I want us to hear is how our assumptions cause us to judge people we don't even know. How is it that when we walk into a situation and we already hold a truth, how does that cause us to judge another human being? All right, so check out this clip. And listen, you guys are going to be guinea pigs. If you were on yesterday, you got to hear the Ben Shapiro already has a bit of an annoying voice to me, but he was on a clip yesterday that I used, and so I got the audio wrong, and it had some slapback delay. So we're gonna roll with this. Hopefully, you guys can hear this. I'm gonna have the producer check it, and so if we restart this, give me some patience. Building the plane as I'm flying it, and so we'll hope it stays in the air here.
Well, in 2020, during the pandemic, I went to my bank. I have good credit. I've paid back my student loans. I, don't have any outstanding debt to income ratio, and I could not get $60,000. And I asked my bank, why was I
We
denied
got audio, or did we miss
a person
audio?
who has A1 credit, don't have any student loans. I have, 2 or 3 properties.
All right, before she goes on, thumbs up on the audio, thumbs down on the audio. Don't got it? All right, let's try this a different way.
I just got too much of a delay. I'm not even there yet.
All right. There's a delay going out on the interwebs. All right, so she's got student loan, she's got student debt, she's going in for a loan, she's paid off her student loan, she's paid off her debt, she pays her payments on time, and everything's golden, and yet she gets turned down for the loan. And that's where we're at. And let's roll ahead, assuming we can hear it. Let's see if anyone in the chats says anything. Man, you guys are quiet in the chats. You got to check out the chats in the morning. All right, so we're going to look at how her assumptions of others affect how she sees others. And if you guys will bear with me for just a minute, I think I can run a check on.
As
right.
A1 credit, don't have any student loans. I have, 2 or 3 properties. Why am I being denied a $60,000 personal loan? And you know what?
You said because you're black?
They didn't give me an answer.
But how do you know it's because you're black?
What I'm saying is,
wait a minute.
There are no
How do you know it's because of
indicators.
the color of your skin?
What I'm saying is, there are no indicators for why I should have been denied. That's what I'm saying.
Do you know that any white people have been denied with the same qualifications?
I don't know, because I didn't go out and poll white people.
There's no way.
This isn't a conversation about white people. This is a conversation about me.
No, but there's no way.
You're acknowledging a hindrance. You're acknowledging a hindrance to
I'm acknowledging a hindrance in what you're considering to be a successful person, doing what they're supposed to do, going out and working, having good credit, paying their bills on time, and still being denied with no reason given.
As a black person,
as a
you're
black
saying
person,
that happened to you
I'm saying
because
that
you were
happened
black.
to me. What I'm saying is,
yes,
I'm saying it happened.
Okay.
And I have.
So there's all of this assumption, and I want you to notice real quick kind of where she's at. The first thing she does is say, well, that's Brandon Tatum, former police officer, retired police officer there, who says, well, how do you know? Did you check with white people? She said, well, this isn't a conversation about white people, so I don't have to check with him. When we chunk off a section of the data, we're not going to see clearly, right? And so that's something we intuitively do. And sometimes the smartest people in the room are the ones that are doing it, and doing it without realizing they're doing it. So it's not always, someone trying to be disingenuous. But what we do is we argue for our positions, not from the information. All right, so check out.
Happen to be black, yes.
Kalea, I want to talk about
But wait a minute, I'd like Brandon to respond to that. I see you sat back. You're frustrated.
Listen,
I'd like you to respond.
I will.
Yeah.
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All I want to say is that I can fight with you if we have evidence. If you went to the bank and you have evidence that they've been giving loans to people with equal qualification as you have, and because you being black, they denied you, let's go to the bank and let's show up. Let's pull up. Okay. But the thing is that it's not fair to make that determination without unequivocal facts, because what it does is it generates this idea that it's because you're black. There may be something or that you could have changed on you when you made the application or not that could have caused you to get the loan. There are some educational points there that could have been effective, but you can't just say it's your race, because then you're telling the next young person and the next young black person, and before you know it, they don't even give it a try when you're saying something that's not verified.
No, I'm not saying.
Right. So she backs off a little bit, and they come to terms, and they come to agree a little bit. But you can see the point, right? When I come in, and we see this in our culture a lot. Are there bad people in the society? Yeah, sure. What's the percentage? I don't know. We can look at that, but only if we're going to have an honest conversation. But everyone who cries, my son yesterday, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but there's an after-school program, and he was like, well, I don't want to go back there because they were mean. They treated us horribly, and he comes up with this totally inflammatory word for how they treated him. And we start to ask about what they did. And it's like, well, they made me do my homework before we played. And then they made me sit there, before, and then we got to play. But I had to sit there and do nothing. And, and we're thinking about that going, well, it sounds like they were being responsible. A few months earlier, we were having conversations with the after-school program because it was just, let's put you down in front of Disney and let you, let your brain melt for an hour or two. But it's funny because I remember being that way as a kid. Everything that happens to me that I don't like is those guys, because of my preconceived notion of what truth and my own self-importance was. All right, I want to move on to this Peter Boghossian clip. It's a great clip. And sorry for the hiccup on the YouTube stuff. We're still trying to get it going without that delay. And like I said, I'm flying the airplane while I'm trying to put it together, and I'm trying to learn all this interweb stuff. So, all right, this is a great clip. And it's just a section of a section. And if you find any of these, Peter Boghossian is the guy with the mic. And he's an atheist, but he's really passionate about having better conversations. And the guy on the right in the blue shirt with the sunglasses on his head next to Peter Boghossian, he is Warren Smith. And he lost his job, ironically, for having a conversation with a student about J.K. Rowling, just asking questions. And that YouTube video blew up on the internet, and the school didn't like it because it didn't run with the popular narrative. And so he was basically canceled out of his job because he held the wrong political views. And they're out there doing something called street epistemology. And so they've got these little circles on the ground that, strongly agree, mostly agree, sort of agree, neutral, and then sort of disagree, strongly disagree, full on, so they've got, basically like a gradient in a half circle of really, really agree and really, really disagree. And just watch how this plays out, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
So if there's no evidence for it and you're not sure of it, do you think it happened?
I'm pretty sure it did happen. I'm just not entirely sure of the details of it. I'm sure it happened. I'm just not sure.
What's the it in that sentence?
Like that she said some bad stuff
about Jews.
I think so.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, because you just said, I'm sure it happened. Maybe we should spin the game again and be like, Is J.K. Rowling anti-Semitic?
Okay, let's do that one. J.K. Rowling is anti-Semitic. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move.
They have to move to agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
You're in the neutral?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the neutral?
Yeah.
You're in the neutral. Why are you on the... how come you're in the neutral?
I just don't really know anything about it, so I can't really form an opinion.
Would the default be neutral if you don't know about it?
I think so. I don't know.
How come you're on the neutral?
I'm of the same opinion. I don't think I know enough about the issue to have a opinion on it. And I think neutral means no opinion, so.
I guess I'm struggling with if so that's Reed. You've never seen Reed before. If I said Reed is anti-Semitic, why would the default be neutral?
Reed?
That guy right there.
Okay. So he's anti. If you said.
Well, no. I mean, I'm trying to figure out why the default for things is if I said to you, there are ghosts in my basement, the default to that wouldn't be neutral. Unless you want to make the claim, to say that person X is anti-Semitic, unless you want to say that everybody's anti-Semitic, and then it would be. Do you see the point? Why would the default be neutral?
Yeah, right. And then the pause, and then the kind of epiphany. What's missing here is what Jesus brings. So why would the default view of someone else be neutral? Does that sound like Jesus? So why don't we think better of others? I've served a lot with people in... I got to keep my fingers off the. I have people in the studio to do this for me, and I got to keep my fingers off the keyboard, back and forth switching stuff. Again, still learning the interwebs, right? And so grateful that you're here for the journey. So I hope you get a bit of a laugh out of my techno fail. Now, look, why don't we start by thinking better about others? Why wouldn't that be our default position, right? Why wouldn't our default as Jesus followers to believe the best about others in all things? So I don't start assuming someone can't understand what I'm trying to say or that it's too much for them. And sometimes I get myself in trouble because I offload a lot of information and they're not ready for it. But I'd rather find that out and back up than assume that they can't track with what I'm thinking. What does that say about how I view myself? How many times have we served in ministry with people who they're a little bit socially awkward and they're off? Maybe they're on the spectrum somehow. Maybe they just were never really taught about basic hygiene things, or they have no sense of style, or they don't really know how to read a situation. So they talk a little too long and about things people don't really track with. And we sit there and we listen and we nod our head. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we're really not with them. Right? We really haven't sat where they're sitting and seen the world through their eyes. And so often following Jesus, we perceive it's about fixing others instead of loving others. He made him a little lower than the angels. That's our God. That's our Savior. He came and walked in our shoes. He grew in wisdom and stature every day. He knew what it was like to grow up as a human and how difficult that is. And he faced the challenges that we face, so we don't really have an excuse not to sit where other people sit, but it's a challenge. So we often make assumptions about people, and this is where, I was talking about political parties. It really torques me off when I hear a certain political party tell me that certain people can't get an ID because, they don't know how to get an ID. What? Why are you starting with the lowest possible assumption of others? Why aren't you assuming the best about others? And then get proven wrong. Why don't you go ask all your friends like that and see if they have any issues? Or, and this is when it's funny, I worked for, I don't know, a couple decades probably in a really high-end community. It's where all the professional basketball players, they lived in this area of town, for the local pro basketball team. And so I lived out there in that area. And, well, I didn't live in that area. I lived outside that area because I couldn't afford to live in that area and work for a church. And so our church was in that area. And so a lot of the people who came had a lot of means and were highly successful people. You know what? One of the most interesting things I found over the couple of decades I served in that community, it was the people with means and who were highly successful that really didn't have as much culture as the people who were living paycheck to paycheck. When I would talk about, because I'm kind of I would even say this is how much of a classical music snob I am. I don't even call it classical music because I don't like the classical period. I like the Romantic era and the 20th century era. And so a lot of people, we just look at, well, it's all symphonic music. It's all classical. But there's actually eras in there. It's kind of like, I like rock and roll. Oh, you like Chuck Berry? No, I like Led Zeppelin, right? It's that kind of a difference. But it was the people who were like me, living paycheck to paycheck, who were more apt to be like, oh, dude, you have symphony tickets, let's go. And it was the people with means who were like, And so it's funny, we assume, the point is, not that that's a universal truth, that was just my anecdotal experience in that culture, but we often assume things about people. And we assume things based upon our understanding of the world and the way the world works. And then we judge others, and then we can't hear them. When we understand others, we win. When we understand their why, that's when we win. Because all this other stuff I'm talking about, working out the answer to the question of Jesus, leaning into a life of change, none of it happens. None of it happens if we can't understand each other. It's all a waste of time. If we can't get over that first basic truth, that when someone else speaks, I can't jump to, well, you just need to. Right? And this is an axiom that, countless people have said to me over the past couple of decades. It's one that I picked up because I started thinking about that phrase, and I'm like, well, you just need to assumes that the problem underneath everything is known to the person saying it. So they're just skipping over the part where they say, well, the problem is, or the problem with you is, therefore you just need to. Or give it to God, but don't give it to me. All of these little idiomatic phrases we throw out as like helpful bits, well, when God closes a door, he opens a window. Yeah, never say that at a funeral. So we throw these things out there because we don't know what to say. We get a little insecure, and I get it. We're not terrible people if we've said these kind of things. We all do it. I've done it. I've said things that were simplistic and not helpful. The point is, when we listen, when we truly understand others, well, that's when we win. That's the big win. Everything depends upon that. And that's why there's such a fight in culture. When we see when we see in culture that there's this idea of misinformation and disinformation. I was watching this one interview on NPR with this person, and they were talking about the shooter in Buffalo. This is a few years ago. And they said, now, you don't have to read his manifesto. I read that, so you don't have to read it. And let me tell you what it says. And then she went on to misrepresent what it says. When there's a war over what truth is, the antidote is to live like Jesus. It's to actually really listen and get into the details on some of these issues. A lot of people don't know, on the left or the right, we had a presidential candidate with, 34 felony convictions or whatever. A lot of people don't even know the details of the case, that what they were being accused of was a misdemeanor. What made it a felony was that they said there was an underlying crime. But they never convicted him of an underlying crime, and they never shared what the underlying crime was. So, understanding the details helps us understand where people are coming from. When we just take the surface level data, we miss people. So when our friend starts talking about why they think democratic socialism is a better way for the country, I don't bring out the wealth of nations. It's difficult for me because I strongly oppose that ideology. I think Jesus would oppose that ideology, because you can't really have socialism without authoritarianism, right? Because at some point you have to forcibly take money and wealth and means from people who have it. At some point you have to come in and collect it all if you're going to redistribute it and make everything even. But I try, and so it's even hard for me talking about it to kick in my empathy. But that's the big challenge, isn't it? When they talk, am I willing to lower myself? And I often don't do it. I often fail on the things that are most challenging and most difficult for me. I fail to be like Jesus. And that's really my heart, and I think that's our heart. When we listen and when we understand, and when we understand someone's why, we win. But here's the thing, I'm never going to get to that democratic socialist's why if I don't let him talk, if I can't hear him out. And if you know me, you know that that's a very big challenge for me. And so that's a massive aspiration in my life. And so I love sitting around with other people who are great listeners, because it allows me to watch them at what they do. And, I had a friend tell me, it's like, dude, when I'm a listener, it's not happy for me. Like sometimes I am biting my tongue. Yeah. But you still have the strength to do it in Jesus. And that's what we want. And that's where we need to be. And then one day, from biting my tongue, I'll move towards not necessarily being so afraid and it's not fear or upset or challenged by what's being said. And then maybe I'll move into more confidence in Jesus and more confidence in Jesus. And then maybe I'll be able to listen to some of the worst things and really hear and understand. Check out this verse here. This is, I'm going to resize this here so it shows up. Got my verse, got all the things. This is from Philippians. It's Philippians 2, 3, and 4 on the Bible Gateway web interface. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. I want to look at one more verse here. And, of course, we got to mess with the font size again. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. Look, if God is shaping us into people that look like His Son, if God is shaping us into people that look like Jesus, then our best place to demonstrate that transformation is with each other. If God is shaping us into people that look like Jesus, then our best place to demonstrate that transformation is with each other. And they will know you are my followers by the way that you love one another. And wouldn't that be just wonderful? If churches were known as the place where we listened and understood and where you could be trusted, they would trust you, that they would trust us to share their deepest why. And that we wouldn't listen with judgment, but we would get into the ring with them and stand next to them. That's difficult. God, shape us into people who look like your son, Jesus. Help us listen. Help me listen. Help me be a better listener. Help me be a better listener to my family, to my immediate friends, and to everyone who crosses my path today. Help me shift from seeing every exchange with another human as a war over truth, and instead see it as an opportunity to empathize and to lower myself and to love someone the way that you've loved me. Make us more like your son every day. Amen. So look, just recap. We got to understand someone's why. That's where it all starts. If we can't understand what they're saying and their why, or we're doing that condescendingly, it all breaks. Sorry, that's we got to remember to silence my phones. So maybe it's us. We have to give up our right to be right. And we have to give over our self-righteousness and our desire to judge others. I have to give up my right to be right, and I have to adopt Jesus' righteousness. And we have to lower ourselves and be like Jesus for others. Look, I am extremely grateful that you're here, that you would care enough about walking like Jesus with others and increasing our unity. It's why I get out of bed in the morning to do this so early. I would much rather sleep in some ways, but to know that there are other people out there who are willing to expand this idea that we should lean into where we disagree and try and find greater unity together, that gets me out of bed. Now it's not easy for me to get out of bed, but that gets me out of bed. Look, it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't remind you of all the socials and all the things. So on X, we are Take Up Your X. Facebook and Instagram, a Jesus Followers Podcast. Rumble is Jesus Follower Podcast, and YouTube is Jesus Follower Channel. And do all the things for me. If you care about this conversation, like, subscribe, comment. Doing those things just helps push through the algorithm. And I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm doing this so that we can start to work to shift culture where we're at, that around the people that we know, we can start to live differently, and we can increase the brightness of that light. Because imagine how beautiful it would be if your first thought when you were troubled by something was, I'm going to go find someone who follows Jesus, because I know they're going to listen to me. I know they're not going to judge me. I know they're going to stand next to me and contemplate it. Now, they're not going to pull away from Jesus, but I'm not going to feel judged either. So thanks again for watching. It truly is my hope that the light of Jesus would shine through you today. Be well.
Yes, you now have a concert side table at the fabulous Blue Note, Madison near Dearborn, Chicago's Mecca for moderns, and for the people who play it that way. Currently, the Blue Note is featuring Count Basie, his famous piano, and his big new band. Yes, it's what you've been waiting for. It's Count Billy Basie, and here's the man himself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Count Basie and the band. Sincerely, you're going to enjoy. We hope you enjoy our little program, because we're going to have fun working for you. Now, in our first number, we featured Joe Newman on trumpet, Eddie Lockjaw Davis on tenor. Little thing we call Flea Blop Blues.